Okay, we've got a terrible lot to do, and you have miserable seats. So let's go Luke 24. Last spring, we were taking advantage of the spring. It's probably our favorite time of the year. Texas only gets about 7 days of it. So when you have small children like we do, spring rolls around, your kids have been in the house, making your wife lose IQ points. The spring rolls around, and you got to get out of the house. And so we got out and started kind of riding our bikes and just enjoying spring. And so spring has kind of a distinct smell to it and kind of a distinct feel to it. And so we were out. My boy isn't apt on the bike yet, okay? So he prefers the big wheel. Do you remember those? I mean, those are kind of classics. So he's on the big wheel. He's riding the big wheel, but we can't go. So I'm just walking because we can't go near as fast as the girls, Lauren and Audrey, on the bikes. And so we're kind of behind them. So they're like dots in the horizon. And all of a sudden, Reed just kind of stops on this trail. He kind of stops and he looks up at me and he goes, Daddy, Jesus died on the cross. Now, we teach our kids that, so that's not like a shocking, it's not like, oh my gosh, that is awesome that you would say that back to me. Like we say that to him about 1 billion times a day, okay? And so I'm going, okay, let's see how much he's retaining. And so I go, and then what happened, right? And then what happens? So Jesus dies on the cross, and then what? And so he thinks about it. You can literally watch him thinking about it. And so I'm going, here it comes, man. It's going to be profound. It's going to be deep. It might even be in the Greek. I mean, who knows? I'm just kind of waiting for, well, Father, the atonement purchased for us. And so I'm just kind of waiting for this so I can see him thinking. Lauren and Audrey had made their way back to us by this point. And so then it kind of catches in his head and he smiles. And so I'm ready for it. I'm kind of ready for him to kind of dispel this truth to me. And he smiles real big. And I ask him again, so what happens after Jesus dies on the cross? And just as confident as he could be, he says, and then a bunny brings me candy, right? And I was just like, well, okay, miserable fail. My wife's kind of looking at me like that's on me, and I'm like, that's the hardening work of God, woman. I cannot control that, all right? Let's pray and hope and maybe fast, and we'll see what the Lord wills. And then, so it's not I mean, it's kind of a funny story about how my son doesn't quite understand the resurrection, but actually the latest Pew survey that went out says that most people have no idea. That they know that Easter is a religious holiday. But they don't really know exactly what it is that we're celebrating. And even most evangelicals don't quite understand what we're celebrating in the resurrection. Usually when it comes to the resurrection, we tend to go about it apologetically. Does that make sense? We want to kind of prove that it happened, or we want to kind of show some evidence that it happens. And so we do some things like we will go, okay, let's do it biblically, and we'll start to argue biblically. Okay, the scriptures testified that he is going to come and that he is going to die, and this is exactly how it's going to take place. Or we want to argue that Jesus himself, at least 5 times in the scripture, says, I'm going to go to Jerusalem, I'm going to die, this is what's going to happen to me. Or we want to make some sort of biblical argument like that. Or one of the ones that I always like to use is that 1 Corinthians 15, some 30 years after the ascension of Christ, Paul is saying, you don't have to believe me, there's still 500 people alive that saw him living after his crucifixion. And so 30 years later, all right, despite the fact that the Discovery Channel would have us believe that the resurrection story is kind of added a couple hundred years later, 30 years later, after the ascension of Christ, you've got Paul saying, you don't have to believe me, I'm not lying. There are people alive that have seen him. Or if we don't want to go biblical with it, because the people go, I mean, it's just your book. You got to put in it whatever you want to put in it. We tend to want to go circumstantial, historical. And so we want to kind of go, well, something happened there. I mean, you got to do something with it. The disciples all of a sudden were ferocious. None of them recant, and almost all of them are killed brutally. They're boiled alive. They're crucified upside down. They have their heads cut off. And nobody ever recants. So you have to do something with that. Or you move on to Jesus' family. Like check this. If you're a skeptic, I get it. I was there for a long time. Jesus' mother and his brother worshiped him as God. Like, are you tracking with that? So like if my dad shows up tonight and he's just like, Matt, I've been sent by God to save you. Here's what's happening. He's going to the house, all right, the madhouse, and I'm taking his motorcycle, okay? So he's going away, and I'm ganking his stuff. And so Jesus' mother and brother think he is God. James is actually one of the first martyrs, all right, of the early church. They take James, the half-brother of Jesus, to the pinnacle of the temple, all right? They called him James the Just. They ask him to recant. He refuses to recant, so they throw him off the top of the temple. He hits, fractures both his legs. He's got a compound fracture. History tells us one. He's bleeding out all over the ground, and while he's laying there with compound fractures in his legs, he's praying for the people that are killing him, all right? And history tells us that a man got so enraged at this, they picked up a club and clubbed in his head. So this is the half-brother of Jesus that's worshiping him as God and is willing to be killed like that without recanting. So something happened to take James from being the half-brother of Jesus to worshiping Jesus as God, all right? Something historical, which is why, if you'll pay attention this week, there will be on Nat Geo, on Discovery Channel, there'll be theories that are rolled out about the resurrection, all right? What really happened? They have to, something did happen historically, so there's this real desire to kind of explain it away or figure it out in a way where Jesus isn't deity, okay? That he was just kind of a good teacher who maybe played a trick on us, or one of my favorites, because it's just as dumb as anything Christians would ever claim, is that Jesus didn't actually die. He just kind of slipped into a little bit of a coma, and then 48 hours, 72 hours after he's absolutely slaughtered, he rolls away the stone and jogs 7 miles to Emmaus, okay? Which is just, listen, I mean, I broke a toe once and couldn't walk like my pelvis worked, okay? And so Jesus apparently, because then what ends up happening in this argument is people are like, well, all over World War II, people get all shot up and they crawl for 2-3 days to medical treatment. Okay, I'll give you that. But Jesus doesn't crawl to medical treatment. He teaches for the next 40 days. He makes himself visible for the next 40 days. It's completely different. So we begin to argue kind of historical, circumstantial evidence. The fact that Josephus, Pliny the Younger, Suetonius all write secular first century literature about the resurrection of Jesus Christ, all right? So they're not believers in Christ, but they're in the first century going, something happened here. All right, something happened here. You've got the fact that for 2,000 years, they worship on Saturday, and all of a sudden it shifts to Sunday. Now, speaking as a pastor, there has been nothing in my interaction with church people that leads me to believe that they enjoy change. Okay? And so after 2,000 years of worshiping on Saturday, all of a sudden they shifted and worship on Sunday. So who went, you know what we should do? I know for the last 2,000 years, here's where we've been hitting, but here, I've got a crazy idea. Let's roll it to Sunday. Let's roll it to Sunday, call it, and let's institute new ordinances, all right? Instead of just Passover, let's do communion. Let's call it communion. Let's do that. Let's break bread, drink wine, and remember the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. So this is what happens to us when it comes to the resurrection. We kind of hear about it apologetically, and so we don't understand what it means for us in regards to application and life. And so we might be able to have some sort of discussion with skeptics about it, but we don't have the weight and force of being able to live and walk in it. And so here's my attempt tonight. My attempt tonight is to put you into the story, really the only story there is, and it doesn't matter in here if you're a strong believer, a nominal believer, or a non-believer. Everybody's caught up in this story. So what I want to do is kind of put the story out there, put you in the story, and tell you why the resurrection matters, okay? Why the resurrection matters. So the scriptures would tell us that there is a creator God, that he created all things, and he created them good, all right? So that everything in how it was created to create in us gladness and worship. So God creates food, and he gives us food so that when we eat food, gratitude swells in our heart, and food doesn't terminate on itself, but actually rolls up into the worship of God who created those things. So when you eat that fajita, all right, what should be happening in your brain is you eat that fajita, and there's a gratitude for the God that thought up those flavors, that thought up that texture, that thought up that combination, that is the God of the fajita, all right? And so that creates in us gratitude. It's that way with food. It's that way with relationships. It's that way. None of those things are intrinsically evil or wicked. In fact, all of them are good. I would even argue that the scriptures would say wine was given to us by God, all right? Like, there's nothing really in creative order that God's like, dang it, what happened there, all right? He didn't like go to the kitchen and then come back and go, you fermented grapes, are you out of your mind? All right, it's not happening. Now, I'm not encouraging in any way debauchery here, okay? But wine was given to us by God. That is clear in Scripture. You can play the game that's not the kind of wine that leads to drunkenness. You know, it's like Kool-Aid. But I've drank a lot of Kool-Aid, and it never led to debauchery, just for the record, okay? Little hyper, little sugar crash, but never debauchery, all right? So wine was given to us by God so that when we take it and drink it, we go, isn't he good that he would give us such a thing as this? And we praise him because of it. Nothing was ever meant to terminate on itself. It was always meant to create in us a heart that worships and loves and is glad in God, so that God is for, when all said is done, when all is said and done, he's for your joy, all right? So that the rules and regulations of God are given to us not so that we might submit to them, because if we don't, God's going to destroy us, but he's rather trying to line us up with how he created the universe to work. And we could go on and on and on here, but here's how God created the universe to be. Now, we know from the great narrative that sin enters into the world and it fractures all of that. Now, all these things that were created not to terminate on themselves, but rather to point to something outside of themselves, all of a sudden now begin to terminate on themselves. So food that was given to us by God to create worship now all of a sudden becomes an end in itself and becomes either gluttony or indifference, both of which are wicked. All right? Wine that was given to us for worship either becomes alcoholism or indifference, both of which are wicked. Relationships become, in that moment, instead of what they were meant to be, they become codependent, all right? Or we use and abuse people to get what we want, all right? We've twisted. We've made, like some of you girls, God bless you, you're looking for the perfect man. You might as well look for the Oompa Loompa, all right? Because you're not going to find him. And some of you guys are trying to find the perfect girl. And that is a Hollywood ridiculous myth. All right? There's no safety in that form of love. There's no comfort in that form. I mean, if Cupid, if a man in a diaper can pop me with an arrow and all the affection I have and all the love I have for Lauren is immediately transferred, love at first sight, on this other woman that just happened to be at the hotel or just happened to be at the grocery store or just happening. I mean, where's the safety and comfort and depth and roots in that? All right? And so you've got this ridiculous version of love. You've got this ridiculous, and all of that is because sin entered into the world, and now things that were meant to point to something outside of themselves, we've made ultimate. And it's also why you always hit the ceiling. All right? It's why you always hit the ceiling. It's why no matter what it is, new car, new gadget, new school, it only takes a while for that high to wear off and for you to hit the ceiling and go, what's next? All right? What's next? It's why some of you are, God help you, habitual shoppers. Because there's some, if you can just get something new, it kind of puts that at bay for a little while, all right? So new pair of jeans, new phone, new car, new whatever you can afford, all right? If you can just go get something new, it kind of puts that on ease. It makes you feel for a second some reprieve, some peace. But it doesn't last long, all right? And you hit the ceiling. Over and over again, you hit the ceiling. The entire point of the book of Ecclesiastes is that you're going to hit the ceiling because nothing on this earth can satisfy you long term except what those things point to, which is beyond the sun, not underneath it. Are you tracking with that? Okay, so the fall enters into the world, and it just is a wreck. And it continues to be a wreck. And in fact, Adam and Eve try to hide from God in a bush, which you're like, come on, bro, a bush? I mean, there's caves, there's mountains, really? A bush? And God, just in his first kind of semblance of grace, he clothes them, all right, sends them out of the garden. Then you've got Cain and Abel. That goes bad. It just keeps getting darker and darker and darker until God, the scriptures say, regrets the day he makes man, and he decides to kill everybody but Noah and two animals, and so of each kind. So you remember, it's great. It's a great children's story right before bedtime, and then God killed everybody. All right, night, buddy. Night. You want me to leave the light on? Okay. It is raining. I apologize. Probably should have saved this story for another night. So God wipes out everybody. Then he comes to a man named Abram, right? The whole world's jacked. Everything's falling apart. He shows up to Abram and he says, this is Genesis 12, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to fix this. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to fix it. And he promises Abraham that through Abraham, that the descendants would outnumber the stars in the sky and the sand on the beach, that he was going to make this great nation, and that the whole world would be blessed. That he wasn't just going to be the Jews, but it was going to be the whole world. All tribes, all tongues, all nations were going to be blessed through what he was going to do through Abram. And so then we fast forward through all the Old Testament characters, and just for the record, one of the most horrific things that's happened to us is that all the Old Testament is kind of made narrative, like children's stories, and so we don't see the beauty and the depth and the meaning in it anymore. And they're just they're in the kids' Bible, all right? But in ours, there's not a lot of weight, not a lot of meaning to it. I think we got to get back to kind of seeing seen the person and work of Jesus Christ in the Old Testament as shadows of what was to come. And so you march through the Old Testament, and you've got, remember, we already talked about Charlton Heston leads the people of Israel out of Egypt and to Sinai, and he makes the covenant with them. You're going to be my people. I'm going to be your God. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to walk with you. He makes this covenant with the people of Israel, and then he knows they're going to sin, so then after that covenant with Israel, he gives them the law. All right? And the law is, this is what it means to follow me. This is lining yourself up with how I created things to be, which is why they always celebrated the law in the Old Testament. All right? Like in our day, it's, oh, the law is wicked. All right? But I mean, David lays in his bed at night singing about the law. I mean, just think about that. It's like honey on my lips. I love obeying what you tell me to do. Think about how culturally different that is from where we are. Because David understood that if God says this is what you should do, he's not trying to steal from David, but he's trying to line David up with how he actually designed the universe to work, and that there was more joy in doing it this way than there was in doing it that way. God wasn't trying to rob him. He was trying to give to him. David understood this most of his life, all right? Had a couple of bad weeks in there, but most of his life understands it, and he gives them the law. Now, he knows they're going to fall short of the law. That was the whole point of the law. I'll contend till the day I die, or until the day the Holy Spirit convinces me of something else, that the 10 Commandments weren't given to you so that you might obey them, but to show you that you can't, despite the fact that it's entry-level elementary school morality. I mean, that's it. The 10 Commandments are not complex ethics, all right? Don't lie. Hey, leave your neighbor's wife alone. If it's not yours, don't take it, all right? This isn't complex ethics. This is, it's on the wall in kindergarten, all right? 5-year-olds can grasp it. And yet everyone in here would fall short. Any liars? Anybody ever lie? I mean, okay, so maybe this, for some of you, this is your first one, all right? You ever take anything that's not yours? Sure, you ever covet? And what I mean is, we'll do covet this way so you clearly understand it. Do you ever see something bad happen to somebody and part of you just kind of rejoices in it? I mean, not out loud. You would never go, oh, they had that coming out loud, you know. That was a bit, but just in your heart, you kind of went, about time, Lord. I've been asking you to do that to that person for a long time, so thank you for hearing my prayer, right? So listen, we could do really something simple like that and just go, and you're guilty of all of them. I don't know that you'd make it through any of them. So you go, come on, man, I never killed anybody, Chandler. Okay, but if you remember what Jesus does in Matthew is he goes, you've heard it said, don't commit murder. But I say if you have rage in your heart, if you have anger in your heart, you're guilty of the same sin. So Jesus was interested in the heart, not just some external action. And so most of you have built this false Christian bravado on outside external morality instead of an inward transformed heart. All right? It's probably the biggest error that we see regardless of denomination, regardless of church, regardless of background, regardless of, it's kind of this external, I follow the rules, so I'm good, instead of a heart. So I don't murder anybody, but I still have a lot of anger issues, but I'm good because I don't murder anybody, okay? Or I've never slept with anybody that isn't my wife, all right? But I've got a lot of lust in my heart, but because I haven't acted on that, I'm fine. Okay? And this is that thing that God wants to address in Christ over and over again. But he gives us the law, and then we fall short of the law, so he gives us the sacrificial system, all right, to make atonement for sin. So Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement. So you take two animals, all right, a spotless lamb, and you jab a knife in it, and you spill the blood, and you take that blood, and you put it on the mercy seat, and then you get the scapegoat, all right? In Yom Kippur, you take the goat, you confess the people's sins over the scapegoat, and then you release the goat into the wild as a symbolic act of carrying away their sins. Now, we're going to find out in the New Testament that none of that actually worked. It was just symbolic of something to come. That's why Jesus is a propitiation for sins in the past. That David and Moses, those men were saved by faith in what was to come, not the sacrificial system, because God does not desire the blood of goats and bulls. All right? And the scriptures are pretty clear about that. So he gives us the law. All right, and then from the law, the people and the sacrificial system from that, they don't even get that right, so they go away into exile, and then in exile, everything just kind of goes quiet for 400 years. I mean, you got pretty much 400 years of nothing, and then a crazy man comes out, I mean, basically a homeless dude wearing camel skins, eating roaches, shows up, and he starts going, the kingdom of God is here, all right, and that language is what God told Abram he was going to do, that he was going to fix once and for all, the fall. It's here. The kingdom of God is at hand. The kingdom is here. So all the strife, all the pain, all the sorrow, the kingdom of God is being ushered in. There's one coming that's ushering in the kingdom, and all that ails us and all that hurts us and all that's wicked in humanity, whether that's systemic, whether that's racism, or whether that's personal individual sin, all of that's going to go away because the king is here. And then you have John the Baptist who makes way for Jesus. And Jesus shows up, he begins to live this perfect life, and he begins to teach the gospel of the kingdom as the king of the kingdom. And we see him called the king repeatedly. I'll just read some of these to you. You don't have to stay there in Luke 24. We'll get to that. At his birth, the Magi show up in Matthew 2:2, and they say, "Where's the king of the Jews?" As he heals people in Luke chapter 11, he's called the king. As he teaches in Matthew 21, he's called the king. At the triumphal entry in Luke 19, he's called the king. At his trial in John 18, he's called the king. In his death in Matthew 27, he's called the king. He is the king, ushering in the kingdom of God, the one who will make all things new. This is what Jesus does as he walks and he teaches and preaches the kingdom of God. Okay, this is honestly how all this ties together when John the Baptist sends a runner to Jesus. John the Baptist is in prison. You remember? He faithfully declares, he makes some shots at Herod, who's kind of sleeping with his brother's wife, and then calls him out on it, and so gets put in prison. And so he's in prison kind of going, what just happened here? We were doing this deal, and now I'm in jail. So he sends word to Jesus saying, are you the one, or should we expect another? Jesus quotes Isaiah 61, which is a messianic promise or messianic passage about the coming of the kingdom of God. And he says to him, tell him what you see. Tell him that the blind are seeing, the lame are walking, right? The poor are being cared for. And just an interesting take, so you can always be prepared for this. In Isaiah 61, he ends it with, and the captives will be set free. But Jesus leaves that part off to John, who's in prison, as a way to telling John, I'm the one, but you're going to die in prison. All right? And so you've got to kind of get out of your head that you're good and God owes you. Because we all suffer, we all bleed, we all cry, you've got to get out of your head that if you behave right, somehow God owes you something for that good behavior. All right? His love for you wasn't based on your behavior to begin with, and trust me, you don't want it to be. You don't want it to be based on your righteousness. All right? I guess this is the way to say it. You don't want fair. That's how you want unfair. You want really horrible unfair. Okay? So Jesus lives the perfect life, and then he goes to the cross. And this is good and right, and we know this. And most people grasp and understand the cross of Jesus Christ. In fact, let me be real honest with you. If you don't have the cross, you don't have a church. All right? If you don't have the atonement of Jesus Christ in the cross, you can do all the self-help crap you want. All right? But if you're the problem, all the self-help stuff in the world doesn't help you. Are you tracking with that? So if you've got a church that doesn't teach the atonement, doesn't teach the cross, doesn't have the bloody agony of the wrath-absorbing sacrifice of Jesus Christ, you have the Rotary Club, you have Kiwanis, you have something, but you don't have a church. Okay? You have humanitarian aid, but you don't have the kingdom. Okay? Now, Jesus goes to the cross, and we see all these things that happen in the cross. So, to quote Galatians 2:20, that I have been crucified with Christ. What happens for me as an individual in the cross of Jesus Christ is that Matt Chandler dies on that day. Despite the fact that I'm thousands of years of being born, Matt Chandler dies. So every bit of unrighteousness, every bit of wickedness, every dark night of the soul, everything I did in my life that I regret, everything that I will do that I will regret, died on that day. Matt Chandler died with Christ on that cross, okay? So that his death becomes my death and his life becomes my life. It's the great exchange, right? My sin for his righteousness, so that I'm seen as perfect and spotless and holy, not because I am, but because he is, and he has imparted or imputed that righteousness to me. And so we find out all these things. The cross kind of saves us from. So it saves us from the wrath to come. It saves us from slavery to sin. That's Romans 7. It saves us from the works of the devil. That's John 8. It saves us from the power of darkness. That's Colossians 1. It saves us from the law. 7:1. How does it save us from the law? It saves us in that the law couldn't save us because it was weak because of our flesh, right? Romans 8. And so it saves us from the law, not that the law is broken, but that we are broken and can't seem to obey it. So that's how it saves us from the law. It saves us from the law of sin and death. That's Romans 8:2, which means regardless of how this goes for me, all I have in my future is kind of ever-increasing joy. All right? I mean, I might die a young man. So might you. In fact, statistically, some of us are. Statistically, some of you aren't graduating. Statistically, I mean, it's coming for all of us. We're a lot closer. And you can eat all the spinach and do all the Pilates you want. It's still coming for you. You can't control it. You can do some wise things, but you can't. I mean, your days were marked before you were, is what the scriptures would teach. So the cross saves us from. Now, here's where we get into the resurrection. The resurrection saves us to. Okay, so the resurrection is God's kind of shot across the bow that this world matters, so that you and I then become, because of the resurrection, agents of change. So we're saved from sin, and we don't sit around and wait to get either sucked up in heaven, all right, and say goodbye to the left behind suckers, all right, as we float up into heaven. You can have my car, Bill. I mean, that's kind of the predominant thinking. We don't get saved. We're just kind of waiting to go to heaven, but rather we've been saved from, and then we've been saved to. So that we don't just kind of sit around and wait for the return of Christ, but we've got a mission while we're here. And that's what the resurrection starts unpacking for us. In Romans 6, we're saved with union for Christ. In John 3, we're saved towards eternal life. In John 17:21, we're saved into the participation of the triune life of God. So this is what C.S. Lewis called the dance, long before Garth Brooks stole that. And so what you've got in the Trinity, I'll try to do the Trinity in 3 minutes. The Trinity is not God the Father standing with just giant muscles and then like little baby Jesus and little Holy Spirit kind of dancing around him going, you're awesome, you're awesome, you're awesome, and God going, I am awesome, all right? That's not what's happening in the Trinity. If you'll study your Bible, what's happening in the triune nature of God is you've got God the Father glorifying the Son, and the Son glorifying the Father, and the Spirit glorifying the Son, and you've got this kind of dance, this kind of perfect community that loves one another. That's out of the overflow of that community that creation even occurred. All right, you got the triune God of the universe that's going, no, you're awesome. No, you're awesome. No, you're great. No, you're great. You're great. And it's kind of this eternal, constant, perfect dance that we then get invited into. All right, we've been saved into knowing God. We've been saved into freedom, Galatians 5:1. We've been saved into community, 1 Corinthians. Why? Because God is communal in his essence, and we've been saved into this, which means this, that your faith in Jesus Christ is personal, but it is not private. All right? Some of you have already gotten to the habit where you go to church, but you don't belong to anyone. You know, you go to church, but you don't belong to any given church. It's kind of, Austin for you is kind of like an ecclesiological buffet. You know, you kind of take a little bit of this because you like that music and you like this guy's preaching and you like this guy's home group and these guys have intramural sports and you've got, so you kind of just treat the church like an ecclesiological buffet, but scriptures would say it's not your job to go to church, it's your job to belong to one. In fact, the fullness of your relationship with Christ will work itself out in the community of faith, not in isolation. So your faith is personal. It's absolutely personal, but it was never designed to be private. So the more you make it personal and private, the more you rob yourself from what God died and was raised to bring you. Okay, a couple more, and then we'll get into, the resurrection purchased for you not only a salvation from sin, but also a bringing into, a commission into God's mission. Thank God for tape right there in that moment, because that's my last note. So we get saved into mission, which means God's calls it, and his purpose, remember back to Abram, his purpose all along was the restoration of all things, the reconciliation of all things, the ushering in of the eternal kingdom to push back what's dark in the world, and his means to bring that about is his work in you and then him taking you and placing you on mission. So I'll explain it on the individual level like this. Psalm 139, that's kind of been hijacked by women's ministry. All right, you've been fearfully and wonderfully made. I mean, that's just kind of a text that somehow has become a life verse for women. And I'm okay with that, but it applies to more than just the females. In Psalm 139, you got this really beautiful text that says God's been intimately involved in you as a person. That in your mother's womb, he knit you together, and he knit you together at two levels. He knit together your unseen or your unformed substance. This would be those things that you don't see. It'd be your personality, it'd be your makeup. You know, some of us are, you know, I guess if you're psychology, it's fight or flight. You know, kind of what your personality type is. He designed and made up your physical form. So I'll give you this example from my own life. For some reason, I'm just loud. I've been loud my whole life. I've been given what adults called when I was younger, a voice that carries, okay? And so one of the deep ironies of my life is that what I've been beat for the majority of my life, I now get paid for, all right? I mean, it's just strong, and it doesn't tend to go out very easily, and it just tends to kind of maintain strength. Well, according to the scriptures, God designing me in my mother's womb goes, give me some more vocal folds. Okay, no, some more. No, I know that's twice the amount. Give me a little bit more. All right, a little bit more, a little bit more. And so the first part of my life is just kind of, doesn't make a lot of sense that I can't whisper. All right? It doesn't make a lot of sense that I tend to be screaming no matter what I'm doing. Bless my mom's heart. didn't make sense, but then upon conversion and as the mission of God and my role in the mission of God began to fold out, now it starts to make perfect sense. All right, now, if you roll that idea forward to Acts 17 and you start reading Paul's great speech and great sermon in Athens, he says that the times and boundaries of your habitation were made for you, were decided for you before you were born. So catch this. Not only has God designed your aptitude, your personality, and your physical makeup, but then he also physically placed you in a time and in a place. And that text says, so that men might find God, that they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from any of them. So some of you are here at the University of Texas studying business. All right, and God gave you that aptitude. You know, you just you see the world like, Neo saw the world. It's just it's just binary code in front of you. And so that's just kind of how the world works for you. That is a divine design by God who placed you not only at the business school here at the University of Texas, but also is going to place you in the domain of business out in culture to do what? To be a minister of reconciliation. To be a proclaimer of the gospel so that the kingdom might continue to push forth, so that you might understand your money, your talent, your time, your energy, and all that you do through the lenses of being agents of reconciliation, being agents of change, being agents of mercy. And so some of you are athletes. Some of you are just egg-headed philosophy majors, all right? You kind of drive us crazy. You're just kind of, oh, man, that test killed me, all right? And you get it back, you made 107 on it. We hate you, all right? The rest of us study all night, and we make a 72, okay? You just put the book on your head and pulled out the perfect score, okay? And so I'm trying to get you to see through different lenses than, oh, man, here's my time at Texas, and my time at Texas is about something down the road. It absolutely is. But it's also very much about your time at Texas. Okay? And you've already begun to hear testimonies all week long about guys who have said, man, I knew nothing about the Lord, and all of a sudden this guy starts to talk with me. This guy, I knew nothing about the Lord, and I go to football practice, and a guy named Jeff Faircloth goes, hey, I'm going to share the gospel with you. When do you want to do that? This is happening. You can tell me when and where, but it is happening. Where do you want to do it? You want to do it after lunch? You want to do it after practice? Where do you want this to go down? All right? And so you've got, I've kind of got this kind of interaction that occurs, all right, where God put in my pathway someone who loved him, who was a ministry of reconciliation. So I'm standing up here getting to preach to you the ministry of reconciliation because somebody actually lived this out, not on a stage, not with their Bible open, but in a football locker room. Okay? And that should happen in dorm rooms, and that should happen and listen, nothing exposes the idolatry in your heart like the mission. Nothing. I don't think anything does. Nothing will expose your love for this world. Nothing will expose your love for wealth and your love for comfort. Nothing will expose your fear of man issues like the mission, like the call to be about the reconciliation of God to make all things new, right? Because when that embarrassment creeps up when it's time to share the gospel, or when you don't really want to go there because it's not safe, or you don't really want to give your money to that, or when you don't, those are really revealing something about your heart and what you really believe and what you really value and what you really cherish, all right? So don't waste, here's my plea, don't waste the time, gifting, and placing of God here at the University of Texas and then on into the future. It's strong. That helps if I just put my hand on it. Like, it doesn't help at all. Yeah. Like I could do this, but then they can't hear me. So yeah, it's, anyway, we're fine. It's the wind. Holy Spirit blows as it wills. Now, so maybe we can get it to come, Lord, back from this way. From behind the building. So my plea is that you would understand what your life is about and what your giftings are about and what your skill is about and what your, like everything in the creative order, every bit of history, every bit of technology, when all said and done is about the gospel. Like the internet's about the gospel. Airplanes are about the gospel. Like every time I take off on one, I'm just like, this is freaking unbelievable. All right? This just got this giant, and I completely understand the physics involved and lift and thrust, and I'm not an idiot. I completely get that, but that God gave us the airplane, that God gave us the internet, that God gave us those things. All those things are about his gospel. All the domains of society, whether that be education, whether that be art, whether that be business, whether that be ag, whether that be, not, everybody calm down, not the Aggies, agriculture, okay? Regardless of what the domain of society is that you're going to play in, you've been gifted by God, wired by God, educated by God, and placed in those places for the name and the renown of God, to be caught up in this story until all things are made new. Now, I don't think we build a ladder to heaven. all right? There's never going to be this day where everybody on earth loves the Lord and everybody on earth worships him. That day's not coming for us, but we work towards that end until he comes, the second advent, and makes all things new, all right? And some of you, like we grew up in different generations, which is, I'm just kind of starting to realize, like video games for me growing up was a black stick and an orange button, right? And every game kind of made the same noise regardless of what game you were playing, okay? If you wanted to make popcorn when I was a kid, you either did this air pop thing or you had to put like Crisco in the bottom of a pan and put seeds in there, right? There was no press a popcorn button on a box in your kitchen that popped it for you, all right? You had to stay in there with it. You had to, I mean, everything's changed. But here's something I've noticed about your generation that's really quite compelling for me in my understanding of what we've been called to. You're bored. Despite the fact that you have more to do right now than any generation that has ever lived, ever in the history of the earth, you've got more of it and you're still bored out of your minds. Could it be that you're substituting cheap things for what you've actually been called to? Okay, so my question would be, how many Bible studies do you have to go to? How many accountability groups do you have to belong to? How many, I mean, you start working through it. How many Christian clubs you got to join? I mean, it seems to me we love to study the playbook, but nobody wants to play the game. I mean, that's that kind of strange animal that happens among evangelicals, this constant study of mission, this constant study of reconciliation, this constant study of the atonement, and then we just kind of sit on it as if God's whole goal in this whole thing was you. Like his whole plan and the whole thing is that guy. Like you're the pinnacle of all he wanted to do. And so that's idolatry. That's a misunderstanding of the meta-narrative that the scriptures teach, which is God's reconciling all things to himself in heaven and on earth, all right, both visible and invisible, whether rulers or powers or authorities, all things are made by him and for him. He is before all things, all right? He is the head of the church. And so you and I are part of that ministry of reconciliation. Most of us, though, just don't tend to walk in it. We just keep reading the playbook over and over and over again, which is why you're bored. It's why you're attracted to epic movies, because you've been designed by God to kind of live out an epic, but you're just kind of selling that call for whatever 3.5-hour Blue Alien movie is out. Okay? And girls tend to be drawn more to this kind of romantic idea of love at all cost. Well, you've been invited into that. But you substitute it with this cheap kind of shadow of it instead of participating in the actual nature of it. It's a really dumb, sad trade, honestly. All right? It's really, so many are just craving adventure and purpose and meaning, all the while being handed it, and instead daydreaming about it in some other realm. All right? So you're pretending you're Colt McCoy. You're pretending that you're smarter than you are. You're pretending that you're prettier than you are. You're pretending that you kind of live in this imaginary world where in that world you're this giant hero, despite the fact that you've been called into this kind of epic, eternal, beautiful reality. Despite you. All right? Not because you've got this, God doesn't need you to make this thing work. Are you tracking with that? God's not in the heavens going, I sure would like to do a work in Austin, but hands are tied. I mean, look at these guys. Seriously? No one could do anything with this. Spirit? No. Jesus? No. Okay, yeah. No, we can't. We're stuck here. We're stuck here. All right? That's not, he doesn't need you. You've been invited in. That's the crazy part. You've been invited in. So this is my hope, that you would understand this, grasp this, and then begin to walk in it. And that you would begin to discuss with one another what it looks like, how it plays out in everyday life, what it looks like at the dorm, what it looks like at the frat or the sorority, what it looks like at work, what it looks like moving forward in the business or the domain of realm, in the domain of medicine, in the domain of law, in the domain of government, in the domain of the arts, in the domain of agriculture, in those domains. What does it look like to be an agent of reconciliation? All right? This is what we're trying to do at the Village. This is my hope. This is what I want you to understand about what God's doing in the world. It goes well beyond you, but you've been invited in. So let me pray for us, and then I think we'll do a little bit of worship. My hope is that you would maybe contemplate a little bit, think a little bit about how you do view your life, about how you do see yourself, about how you do understand your natural giftings, about how you do kind of grasp what you've been called to and where you play and what your space is, like where you live, who you are, what your hobbies are, where you work. All of that, according to the scriptures, are a design of God. If you'd see it that way, it'd be a lot easier to go to work, to study, to do those things. That's my hope for you. Let me pray, and we'll worship a bit. Father, I thank you for these men and women. Thank you for a good week to talk about you and who you are. My hope and prayer is that they would understand the resurrection matters, and it matters because it's your kind of shot across the bow that this world matters, and that you're going to save and redeem and reconcile quite a bit before the second advent, before the return. And so it's my hope that in understanding that, we might see all that you've given us, from the resources you've given us, to the talents you've given us, to the places you've given us to live, dwell, and walk out our lives as a part of your great plan to reconcile all things to yourself. Help us, and it's for your beautiful name I pray. Amen. Thanks, guys. Love my week with you.